Good morning, everyone. So I'm glad to see everyone here today, and I would like to take us through a short journey, and this journey is gonna start in Vegas. Vegas, Vegas, Vegas. You know how this saying goes? Whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But you all have to permit me today to reveal something that happened in Vegas. Yes, I'm breaking that rule. I'm going to tell you something that happened in Vegas, and it's one of the key reasons why we're here. So, hello everyone. My name is Obioha Ugbona. I'm an international student from Nigeria, and I'm the outgoing ASI president, and I'm here to welcome you all to the State of Diversity. So, what did I learn in Vegas? You see, earlier this year in January, I was in Vegas for the African Black Coalition, along with other members of the Black Students Union, the Black Resource Center, and the Male Success Alliance. There were 20 other schools there, and I found out something about California State University, Dominguez Hills. California State University, Dominguez Hills is known as the HBCU of the West. Yes, that's the secret. Yes, we are the HBCU of the West. I pretended like I knew that ahead of time, as the ASI president, but had no idea. So we get back home from Vegas, you know, and around that time, that's when ChatGPT started coming on the rise, and I'm like, ChatGPT, kindly tell me why California State University, Dominguez Hills, is known as the HBCU of the West. Now, ChatGPT says, and I quote, while CSUDH is not an official HBCU, it has a strong commitment to serving students from diverse backgrounds and providing access to higher education, particularly for underrepresented communities, which has earned it the name, the HBCU of the West. Can we give a big round of applause for California State University, Dominguez Hills? But now, it's time for us to live up to our reputation and continue to serve diverse and underrepresented students, not only by programs. This trend in DH where you have no idea there's a particular program until you're about to graduate and you are like, oh, wow, could have used this, 2-3 years ago. And that's why Dr. Porter is here. We're going to live up to our reputation, not only by words, but by a strategic plan, which is anchored by thriving students, thriving educators, equitable access, a culture of care, and stand as a pillar of the community. And this would be evident in campus policies, procedures, and practices. Now, some of us may ask, we're already a diverse campus. Why do we need, to go one step further? You see, diversity in a college campus fosters a welcoming and supportive environment for all members of the community, which can lead to positive individual and societal outcomes. And that is why we are here. And finally, let's give ourselves a round of applause for being here today to support our diversity initiatives. So enough of me, because I am also here to introduce someone. He's someone who I've been pleased and proud to work with, someone who I've traveled with, someone who has a vision to lead this campus to a new phase and a new mindset of success. I hereby welcome our campus president, Dr. Thomas Parham.
Let me say good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, OB. Nice to see you again. It's hard to remember the amount of work and struggle that goes into being a leader on this campus of students. Thank you. But it is always appreciated when we have leadership like Obi and his peers before him who collaborate with the administration and the faculty to really represent the voice of students. And as this is his kind of outgoing, right, as he gets ready to graduate and receive not his undergraduate but graduate degree in cybersecurity as an international student. I want y'all to give Obi a little bit more love than that. Ladies and gentlemen, our student body president, this is Obi. So with that, I want to say welcome to this inaugural California State University Dominguez Hills State of Diversity address and program. And this event, my friends, is a vital step in acknowledging and supporting and promoting the work of our university's newly formed Division of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. Now, under the insightful leadership of Dr. Bobby Porter, and I want to pause a minute to make over her for just a second. It's an interesting space for most university presidents in the nation who struggle with this notion of diversity and how to operationalize diversity within the context of their higher education institution. And as everybody is now clamoring to find a diversity officer or stand up a diversity footprint, there oftentimes are pockets of resistance that you run into as a president or any senior executive seeks to try to push that against the forces on higher ed campuses that push against that. So just take a look at the news now, where you got whole governors standing up talking about where woke goes to die, where you have folk in Carolina and trustees talking about what you can and can't do in a curriculum in the university where academic freedom kind of goes out the window, right, in deference to politics. What was fascinating to me 5 years ago when I arrived on campus is as I met with faculty, met with academic senate, and met with department chairs and other folk, there was a general sentiment that said, are you prepared, Mr. President, to support diversity? This is something we want. This is something we embrace. We just have to kind of make it official. And so all of our energy didn't have to, be projected at trying to fight the forces of resistance. Rather, we spent time trying to be creative with it. And as we had a chance to be in space and stand up a position, conceptualize what it might look like, and even think about going through a new search, we actually failed a couple of searches in advance, held off until we found the right person. And I think if you've had a chance to look at Dr. Porter in action and work, during her brief tenure on this campus, you'll see why, right? Every journey is worth the time it takes to find what you are looking for when you find exactly what you need. Dr. Porter is exactly what we need at this moment in time. Ladies and gentlemen, she is our Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. Give it up for Dr. Bobby Porter. That's all the love you got for Dr. Porter. Give it up for Dr. Porter. So as she looks to stand it up, when she and I met when she arrived on campus, I said, I want you to spend time listening. I want you to spend time looking, observing, but I want you to come out with your vision and footprint about what diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice ought to look like on the campus. So I'm loving the fact that everybody has decided to show up today for what is really a coming out party on what we ought to do relative to this thing we call D, E, I, and J. Now, it's important to reflect on, I think, and reaffirm our institution's commitment to justice, even as we highlight the significant steps that have been made in the first year, long before, I think, the formation of this DEIJ division. There were a lot of diversity efforts that were happening across the university in various pockets, in various colleges, in various places. But it's also true, if we're going to be real, that there were some places where we fell short of expectation. There's some places where we still haven't lived up to the promise and possibility that I expect us to be. There's some places where we still assume that, we have these distorted definition of what real diversity is and haven't quite figured out a way to operationalize that within the context of the real work that we do. And so part of this coming out diversity address and this session, this program, is to help articulate a vision of what our campus could be in its best aspirational sense. In our jobs is not simply to rely on Dr. Porter and her team to be able to stand it up, but rather to partner with her, to join hands with her, to lock arms with her, so that we all know, much like Brother Martin reminds us, that we are all caught in this inescapable network of mutuality and tied to a single garment of destiny. So I look forward to seeing what she will reveal. And I've had a sneak peek at it actually already. It's pretty impressive. And please know that our DEIJ will play a very critical role on campus in promoting not only equity and inclusion, but in supporting efforts of leaders to achieve what is true diversity, true equity, and true inclusion, and in tracking progress towards meeting those particular objectives. Now, what am I most looking for? There are people who call us affectionately the HBCU of the West. The HBCUs don't, by the way. They take a little bit of offense at that because they're like, wait a minute, you ain't historic, and right, I get it. And actually, there is an HBCU on the West Coast, right up the block, in fact. My good friend, Dr. David Carlisle, runs Charles Drew University College of Medicine. And so they are, in fact, an official HBCU. But they call us that because we've had historically a large percentage, not only of African-American folk, but also people of color. But I like the frame that you gave it, Obi, because when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, part of what we want to do is create an environment that allows folk to know that they are welcome, that they belong, and they can succeed in spaces like this. But if we're going to do the hard work, and let me say this as I prepare to close, we need to understand that diversity, my friends, is different than demographics. Let me say that again. Obi's bitten with me from Capitol Hill to Sacramento and all spaces in between, where we tout the fact that we have 89% students of color on this campus. Bravo, isn't that nice? But if we relegate our definition of diversity to demographics, we are not doing our job. Diversity is more than demographics. Diversity, my friends, is a question. And the question says, given that you have this percentage of Black and African American and Latinx and Asian and Indian and international folk, given that you have this percentage of women or LGBTQIA or whatever the demographic is, if you have undocumented folk, if you have veterans, whatever the diversity is, if you have folk who are physically challenged, whatever the diversity demographic is, the question is not what is the percentage. The question has to be, how do the policies and practices of this institution and agency change as a function of the changes in those demographics? There are corporations in America right now that are led by women, but they still function, right, in the same values and principles that males ran them with. And why do I make that point? Because there's a fundamental difference, people, between a desegregated environment and a truly integrated one. We don't need just desegregation at Dominguez Hills. We desegregated a long time ago. That's like wondering why the Supreme Court couldn't be black enough until Ketanji Jackson Brown got there. Even though people would say, but wait a minute, we got Clarence Thomas. There's a difference between a desegregated environment and an integrated one. Because if you have somebody there who thinks just like his white counterpart, nothing changes. Because the nation doesn't understand, and we have to be better than that there's a difference, my friends, between skin color and consciousness. Let me say that again. There's a difference between skin color and consciousness. There's a difference between a desegregated environment and a truly integrated one where everybody who represents the fabric of that mosaic can see themselves reflected within that institution. So pay attention to what you hear out of Dr. Porter and the other presentations that you'll see going forward. Because our DEI footprint is not simply based on demographics. It is not simply based on populating places and we can check a box to say we have XYZ percentage of folk. We're really looking to interrogate the policies and practices of an institution and making sure that there's a high degree of congruence between what we preach and what we actually practice. And in the human condition, the psychologist in me understands, right, the vulnerability, the frailty of the human condition. That ain't but one perfect being in the universe. That's the creator, whatever you call him or her. Short of that, we all got flaws. We as an institution will have flaws. We will not always get it right. But if we commit ourselves to trying to be more better, to trying to always close the gap between what we aspire to be and how that aspiration is operationalized every day in the context of our work, then we, in fact, will be the diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice warriors that we really take pride in being. So with that, today's event is not simply a summation, but in some cases a call to action and an arrow pointing us toward the future of York, California State University, Dominguez Hills. So as your president, I welcome you, and I welcome you all who have joined us today, and I encourage you to actively engage with the ideas and efforts that we will discuss in this space. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And now I give you our Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Bobby Porter.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parham. Hello. Oh my goodness, you all look so good. Dr. Parham, thank you so much for your remarks, for your vision to make us a just, equitable, and inclusive model urban university. So another round of applause for our president. And I'll have to join Dr. Parham in recognizing Obi and your leadership. Every time you speak, it just warms my heart. So let's recognize Obi too for his welcome. So good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Bobby Porter. I use she, her pronouns, and I am honored to serve as your Campus Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer and the Vice President presiding over the new division for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. Look at us. Look at us. All right, so I'll be the third person to welcome you to the 2023 California State University Dominguez Hills State of Diversity Address. We have to give that a round of applause. This was a long, long time coming. So as those before me have shared, I haven't been on campus quite that long, but when you put it in context, for the last 10 months, I have been on a journey. I've been on a journey to learn the culture and the climate of inclusion here, to really understand where are we in our diversity practice. Essentially, I've been working to determine what is the state of diversity for our campus. But in all that I learned, it does the campus no good if I just sit on that information, don't share it broadly. Because we have to have a shared understanding for where we are in this work and to create accountability structures for making progress on our longstanding DEIJ efforts. And today's event is all about that. This event is the first of its kind for Dominguez Hills. But as a campus that is committed to advancing social justice, understanding how we're faring in these areas, where we're faring in accomplishing our goals is critical. So I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. And if you've seen a couple of folks running up and down the halls with a little sweat on their brow, I have to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to a couple of members of my team, Miss Yvonne Calderon and Dr. Catherine Germany, for all their efforts in organizing this event today. Please thank them when you see them, because it took a lot to get us here. And I'd also like to thank my fellow vice presidents, who you'll hear from immediately following my remarks, because as our president said, this work is not that of a single individual. It really does require all of us. The last acknowledgement that I'll get before I get into the address, this event would not be possible without our colleagues in University Communications and Marketing. So if you're in the room, you're probably taking pictures and looking at our graphics. I'm grateful to you, as well as our colleagues in the University Effectiveness, Planning and Analytics Office, for drawing down for the last several months all the data that you will hear today and in the program. So please join me in applauding their efforts. Finally, I want to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered here today is the home and traditional land belonging to the Tongva Nation. Today, we come with respect and gratitude for the Tongva people who still consider themselves caretakers of this land. It is through their examples that we are reminded of our greater responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and to take care of each other. So if you've ever been in conversation with me, or maybe you've looked at my background, you'll know that social justice work is all I've ever done. And even more specifically, professional diversity practice. It's all I've ever done in my career. And like many people who have been working in their craft for an extended period of time, I sometimes forget to celebrate the successes, because educational justice is still so far from being realized in this country. Educational justice is my North Star, because for me, someone who comes from humble beginnings, someone who's been told at every point in my life that I couldn't, that I shouldn't, that I didn't belong, that I wasn't worthy, education was my ticket. For me and anyone else who sought to achieve their dreams of a different life, of comfort, of peace, of happiness, education was my key to that door. And it still baffles me that in a country where we have so much, the benefits of a comfortable life, of a full life, are systemically withheld from entire groups of people simply because of the perceived value of the social identities they hold. What I'm proud to say is Dominguez Hills is a place where life-changing educational attainment is accessible and achievable. Our responsibility, and when I say our, I mean all of us, every single person in this room, is to do our part to open our doors, our hearts, and our minds even further to make more room for the masses of people, particularly those who are being cast aside by the mainstream, who are seeking to achieve their dreams of a higher education. And today's address is our barometer for how we're doing in that effort. In our demographics, our academic and professional equity success efforts, in our climate, in our culture, in our structures for equity and inclusion, where are we thriving and where do we have opportunities for growth? And as the prolific Maya Angelou taught us, you can't really know where you're going until you know where you've been. So today's address is all about this. Taking a look at our social justice history to see where we've been, where we are now, and most importantly, where we're going. Today also marks something of a coming out affair for this new Division for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. The division works to ensure that our social justice passion, which we are not short on by any means, is operationalized into a transformative educational experience. Our primary goal is to work across divisions and constituent groups to make sure that all students, staff, and faculty are treated equitably, feel supported, and are prepared to thrive in a global economy. So, with all of that being said, I'll go ahead and get us into the address now. And when we're talking about this idea of a state of diversity, that's a big bite. that's quite a bit to take on. So to paint this picture, I've summarized our efforts into 4 distinct categories. The first of those is student success, which is a breakdown of our student demographics and information on where we are with persistence and graduation along the lines of various social identity groups. From there, we'll talk about workforce diversity or employee diversity. And there we'll cover more high-level demographics across our various employee groups. And I'll give you a sneak peek of a definition for what it means to be professionally successful at Dominguez Hills. From there, we'll get into a section on our campus climate. And not just our campus climate, but our campus climate of inclusion. And in that portion, I'll cover the findings of a thematic analysis across 6 instruments that we issued in the last 5 years. I'm not sure if everyone was aware of that, but in the last 5 years, we asked our campus 6 times in 6 different ways, how do you feel as a member of this campus community? So I'll provide the findings of that. And then the last and final dimension, which from my approach to this work, I would argue is likely the most important. I'm going to talk about where we are in the status of our various structures that we have in place for diversity practice here at Dominguez Hills. So going into this address, it's going to be comprehensive, but it's important to know that it's not intended to be exhaustive. It is not a full compilation of all our statistics and all of our updates, but rather a broad brushstroke to help us understand the building blocks of where we are with establishing a sustainable or fostering sustainable diversity change. And before I get into the substance of the report, I have a couple of little tidbits I'll give you to help you better follow along with the address. So for one, I will cover statistics and various points, but for most of the points, you can follow along with me. There are accompanying graphics and tables in the narrative of the program. So when you checked in, you were given a QR code. You should have been given 2 QR codes. The first one will take you to today's program. So if you have a mobile device and you want to follow along with the program, scan that QR code to access it. Second QR code, well, it gets me to this next section. I'm going to cover a lot of information today, but not just me, but all of my colleagues. We're going to go into quite a bit of detail. So yes, if you want to follow along, please go to our website and find the information is on the campus website, and you can follow along in the program for some of the graphics, tables, and points that I will make. And like I said, for that QR code, if you do have questions, again, quite a bit of information, please use that QR code to access a Qualtrics form and submit your questions. And then in the Q&A portion, we're a little behind on time, so we'll get to as many as possible. But don't worry, if we don't answer in the session, we will respond to questions in the follow-up communication that goes out afterward. So all of that, now we're ready to actually get into the content of the address. So let's start with student diversity and success. According to the data from our latest full academic year, of the over 15,000 students enrolled at Dominguez Hills, the majority of our students identify as Hispanic or Latinx. From there, in terms of order or the size of our demographics, we have Black students, Asian, white, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, and lastly, Native American. Thinking about or looking at more of our majority groups among our students, more than half of our students identify as female. Now in this address, I would like to provide a more complex picture or a more complex depiction of our students' gender identities, particularly to tell a more complete story of our queer and transgender students. However, our data collection efforts for the spectrum of gender identity is a growth area, not for just us as a system, but also us as a campus. We do, however, know that more than half of our students are Pell eligible. Oh, I did get there. Are Pell eligible, meaning that they are in the first in their immediate family to pursue a 4-year degree. Another important characteristic of our student profile is that the average age of our students is 24, with about 98% of our students coming from California. Let me say that again, 98% of our students coming from California. As someone that's coming from the southern region of this country, hearing that kind of baffles my mind. So I think that's an important characteristic of our campus and our student profile. And of those students, 81% come from LA County and 10% from Orange County. A little bit more about our student profile. Last year, new transfer students made up 52% of our incoming class. But that's important because it shifted, because in 2018, that number was at 59%, and in 2014, that number was at 67%. So there's something going on with transfer student enrollment. One more point before I get into our student success data is less than 1% of our students are registered or receiving services from our resource centers for students with disabilities, dreamers, and veterans, trying to give a more holistic picture of the compositional diversity of our students. So with that, I'm going to move into some student success data. So as a whole, our equity gaps on our campus have changed over the last few years. With great efforts, and you've seen them in all places, I'm very grateful to our colleagues in both student and academic affairs for their efforts to close graduation and retention gaps for first-time and transfer students. For the most recent cohort of full-time, first-time, and transfer students, those students who were Pell eligible, first generation, and belong to groups assigned as URM or underrepresented minority, which includes Latinx, Black, and Native American students, those gaps have closed between these groups and what we will call their better served counterparts. However, disaggregating the URM category will reveal they'll reveal gaps between groups. So while we've made progress overall with closing some of our gaps, if we look between groups, we will see that we have more work to do, and closing those gaps is the key to our success. And at the time of this address, we're still working to refine our language and our definitions to be more inclusive and responsive to the student success needs of our API students. But of our API students, we know that within the group, in the aggregate, our API students slightly outperform the overall DH graduation rates. An exception to this is the 2-year graduation rate for API students. However, just like with the broader URM category, when we disaggregate API, we see gaps in the graduation rates. Specifically for our first-time Pacific Islander students, there is a 34% gap in 6-year graduation rates in comparison to the overall student population. Even further, in looking closer at our Pacific Islander students, there's also a gap in both the 2- and 4-year graduation rates. So these numbers, especially where we have gaps, are all areas for further exploration at both the campus and the college levels. To address issues related to academic equity, access, and representation, the university has established several identity-based support initiatives I'm very happy to be a part of and to co-lead with my colleagues in student affairs and academic affairs. And those groups right now are focused on the success for our Black and API students. If you've spent any time with our strategic plan, you know that Going Far Together has numerous goals and objectives to increase academic equity and close gaps here at Dominguez Hills. These efforts and more must and will continue to be a point of focus for our campus diversity agenda. Switching over to workforce, taking a look at our workforce compositional diversity, you will see that there are noticeable differences in the racial and ethnic diversity of our staff, which does include administrators in this graph, as well as our non-tenure track and our tenure and tenure track faculty. And you can see them depicted here. For our staff and administrators, the largest racial groups are Latinx and Black, which aligns with the compositional diversity of our student profile. Among our faculty, the non-tenured faculty include a greater percentage of Latinx and Black faculty members as compared to our tenure and tenure track. This is a remarkable data point in that the faculty who are more representative of our overall student body by design will have a less opportunity to advise and engage in curriculum design and planning unless we are intentional about it. Not shown in this slide, but an important point for me to make regarding the compositional diversity of our faculty. Female identified faculty represent more than half at 58% of our total faculty population, with over half of all tenure track faculty, which is at 57% female identified, and for our lecturers, our non-tenure track, 59% identify as female. And when I get to the staff and administrators, actually which I'll go to right now, the numbers are comparable, but I'll give you some points there. So as I noted before, our staff and administrator diversity is more aligned with our student body profile. And when we put that together, about 63% overall Latinx and Black are represented in our staff and administrator profile. What I like about this slide and looking at it in this way, we've told ourselves a story about our diversity among our staff and administrators in comparison to the broader CSU. But when you look at where we are in comparison to the rest of the system, you can see we have a greater representation across various groups. Another point that I'll make beyond race and ethnicity, similar to our student data collection efforts, data on the spectrum of gender identity is a growth area. Not now, Siri. We'll do that later. Our latest affirmative action report shows, and this is similar to faculty, and as I noted, female identified individuals make up more than half of our student administrator profile at approximately 57%. So I just gave you a lot of numbers. For numbers folks that probably went in, you're already processing it. For others, you're gonna have to go back and look at the recording, go to the website and process that offline. But what's important to know is that the work moving forward, we have to shift our focus from representational diversity solely and ensure that we include efforts towards the professional success of all of our employees. In the coming year, some of our efforts will include examining our recruitment practices, along with exploring our processes for defining and ensuring the professional success of our employees. These efforts and what I hope and what I expect and what I ask for your partnership will be, yes, looking at compositional diversity and how we can increase diversity where it's lacking, but we also need to focus our efforts on advancing equitable outcomes for our students and our employees, providing guidance and support to supervisors so that they consider and apply diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of their work. All of you have likely seen some of the notices we've sent out. We're well aware that one of our gaps is in providing adequate training and professional development around DEI issues. An interim measure that we're taking to address that immediate need. This year we did join the Racial Equity Alliance along with several other CSUs. So we can increase our collective capacity, I'll say it that way, to be an actively anti-racist campus. So if you haven't seen information on that in the coming year, you can expect more resources and tools on how you can use and access the resources and benefits of this membership. So with 2 more sections to go and us running short on time, I don't want to run through them because this conversation is just too important. So I acknowledge that we may go over time. So if you're able to stay, please do. But we are recording this, so I understand that we have classes or you may have meetings, you may have to leave. But I don't want to rush through this content because it's just too critical. So we've gone through our first 2 points. I'm going to move us over to our inclusive climate or our current climate of inclusion. So we know that campus climate is essential because it is the most tangible, or it's the level of the organization that is most immediately felt by all who encounter our campus. As I shared before, over the last 5 years, Dominguez Hills, we issued 6 surveys to assess and to determine these various dimensions of inclusion on our campus climate. Our actions to respond to these findings, however, were uneven across the instruments. Again, I'm looking for where we had actual action plans developed in response to the findings, and across those 6 instruments, it was uneven. So to understand the value of me understanding that although these surveys were issued over 5 years, knowing that we didn't have action plans in place lets me know that if it was an issue 5 years ago and we didn't address it, it's probably still an issue today. So there is value in that information. So with that, along with my colleagues in IT and academic affairs, I commissioned the Campus Climate Analysis Project, which helped us to identify themes across these instruments to indicate the status or where we are in our climate of inclusion, but most importantly, to serve as an indicator or help us to find entry points to the actions that we would take in the time or the years to come. So from this project, we have, 5 themes that emerged from it, and I'll go through each. They were supportive actions, responsiveness, transparency, professional development, and equitable labor and recognition, and I'll tell you just a little bit more about each. So regarding supportive interactions, overall, our students and employees consider us or our campus to be welcoming. The outliers within that group were respondents who identified as LGBTQ+ and individuals with disabilities. both groups reported a less welcoming experience. So supportive interactions with faculty, with staff that our students deem to be in a mentorship role between colleagues, that is an area that emerged when we looked across the instruments and will be a point of further exploration in the year to come. Our second theme was around responsiveness. So when we looked across these instruments, we found that there was a call for us to be more responsive to student feedback, but more looking at it closely, I wouldn't be surprised if also our employees were asking for the campus to be more responsive to the feedback, to address concerns regarding support services, our broader social justice issues, both on and off campus. So a theme around responsiveness. There is also a call for more transparency. So the campus community as a whole would like to see a greater willingness to talk about inequities and a desire for a more robust data and information infrastructure, which we have essentially started with this State of Diversity address. The fourth one here is all around professional development and training. I alluded to it in the previous section that we acknowledge that we need more solutions and a greater response to our professional development and training needs for the issues related to diversity, equity and inclusion, and it also, or actually also emerged as a theme in this analysis project. Lastly is all around equitable labor and recognition, something else I've heard in various places that I visited throughout the 10 months I've been on campus. What this project found, or what we found in the analysis, was that female identified employees experienced a greater, or a gendered, expectation around service, and reported feeling passed over for promotions and development, despite feeling like they were doing more service and volunteer work. So again, as a theme, this is another aspect of our campus climate that we have to take a close look at. So with these themes identified, our next steps are to use these themes as an entry point for designing interventions to improve sense of belonging and improve our climate of inclusion. And I have just one more section that I'm going to cover, and then I'll invite my colleagues to report out on their various divisions. And this is all around our DEIJ infrastructure. So with our infrastructure, I mean this in terms of where we are as a campus community and the structures we have in place to advance diversity practice. Understanding the campus maturation arc, Dominguez Hills established this new division that we've talked about today, devoted to issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And in this division, we're leading the campus's development of this infrastructure to create a more equitable, inclusive campus culture. Areas of infrastructure that we typically see in higher education. So we looked externally and then applied them to our campus. And those come in several areas. And those are DEI committees, university-wide councils devoted to equity and justice, diversity strategic plans, affinity spaces, and policies and procedures. What we found is that we have a version of all of these structures on campus, but again, some unevenness that I'll explain just a little bit more. First, when it comes to DEI committees, the campus has one formal college-based DEI committee and numerous colleges with discipline and department-specific initiatives that are underway to address matters of inclusion and equity. Looking at this and having one on record, this tells me that this is an area for further exploration to determine what is in place, what is working well, and what supports the unit's need to take on these efforts in a consistent and effective manner. We also had 2 campus-wide councils conclude their efforts in this year, and that's the Gender Equity Task Force and the Anti-Racism in the Academy Task Force. I hope all of you have heard and seen their results or their findings. Both of these groups reported out on their findings this semester and continue to have some of those conversations in pockets and spaces around campus. In terms of a diversity strategic plan, so coming to campus, I walked right into our big reveal in the beginning of our implementation process for our campus strategic plan, Going Far Together. And we all know that DEI is embedded throughout Going Far Together. So when I look at our structures and thinking about our diversity strategic plan, essentially our campus strategic plan is our diversity strategic plan. And with that in mind, I actually commissioned a review by EAB using their tool to assess the strength of campus diversity strategic plans. And we came back, we have covered nearly all of the components of a successful diversity strategic plan, but according to the analysis by EAB, we have some definitional work that we need to do with the plan and refine some of our goals and objectives to ensure they actually advance our DEIJ agenda. 2 more points, our affinity spaces. Many of you are already familiar with them. We have 7 affinity centers on our campus. We have 3 faculty and staff associations for various identities along race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. According at the time of this report, unless it's changed in the last week or so, we have no formal alumni affinity groups in place. Very last component that I'll cover is all around policies and procedures. So the campus has a few DEI policies apart from those necessary. Well, we only have a few in place, apart from those that are necessary to ensure our compliance with various federal, state, and system non-discrimination policies. So as the campus looking to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, policies and procedures is another area for further exploration and growth on our campus. So I've covered a lot. I provided more of a global overview of the various dimensions of diversity here at Dominguez Hills. However, we know that this work is never that of a single person, and I've shared that with you earlier. For sustainable and substantive diversity change, we must all take an active role. So with that in mind, I've recruited my colleagues across the various divisions to provide brief updates on the state of diversity and matters in their respective units. The updates will take a similar approach to what I've covered in that they're going to talk about where they are, where they've been in their units, where they are right now, and then where they anticipate going in the next year. Immediately following their brief remarks, because we're off time, everyone, so immediately following their brief remarks, I'll come back and open the floor. We likely won't have time, but for 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll lead into the next part for those who are able to stay for the reception. So up first, we have our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Michael Spagna, with an overview of academic affairs. Thank you.
Lovely. Two, three. Welcome, everybody. So in an update from Academic Affairs, these are things we've been working on for many years, but I think that the pace has accelerated, especially recently. So in starting out this, I wanted to share with you first and foremost, and again, we're coming into this space right now where it is my favorite time, as the president says, our favorite time of year. It's the commencement ceremonies of all of our students. And our division is continuing to pursue opportunities for how do we wind up really making this campus become a modern urban university, especially when we come to DEIJ. And so with this, I want to talk about 5 areas of focus we have in academic affairs, and these are not exhaustive. So again, in terms of time, I wanted to give you 5 primary areas that we're focused on in academic affairs. So, looks like they've adjusted this a little bit from what I had sent over. So let me start out. Let me and as a good teacher, you kind of go with the flow. So first one is faculty recruitment and retention. And so what I would say with this is our first focus is that you remember with our strategic plan that we had talked about the unique thing we're now pursuing is thriving educators. And what that means is everybody in this room, everybody on this campus is a thriving educator. So, and I said this earlier over the weekend, you know in South Korea what they call teachers or educators. They call them nation builders. So I would posit that as thriving educators, everybody in this room and on this university's campus, we are actually university builders, everybody, including the faculty. But in this, I wanted to share with you several things in terms of faculty recruitment and retention that are important for us, really including DEIJ statements in all the applications that we go out, all of our recruiting materials. We want to make sure we're broadening our recruitment pools. We actually are working with Long Beach right now, Long Beach State, with 5 other CSUs to really recruit either students in doctoral programs or in postdoctorate to come in and get to them early. Dr. Philip Vieira, raise your hand in the back. One of the people is our liaison that's been working on this, and interestingly enough, we're having faculty come and say, I never knew that a career in CSU was something I'd want to pursue, but I love what your mission's about, and it really is DEIJ. The other thing that's really important here is that bullet number 2, addressing cultural and gender taxation at multiple levels. As recent as last week in a conversation with the Academic Senate, what is very apparent is everything we're doing in this front is completely insufficient. It's complex, it has to be hit across multiple areas, and simply having an award here, an award there, exceptional service is not going to do the job. So this is going to be a primary area of focus, and it has to happen at all levels. Retention, tenure, promotion standards, what we do to support our colleagues, this is going to be key for us. A second thing here is academic programs and curriculum, designing our programs really from a perspective, and this has been unique over the last several years, that really comes from a perspective that cultural identity and power play a role in learning and really reformatting what we do in education and programming. I would say we have 2 recent successes on this front. You might have heard us say multiple occasions, we have a brand new occupational therapy doctorate. It's completely based on equity and being of the community. The second is we just got approved a couple weeks ago for the only EDD doctorate in education program in the entire CSU that has justice in its title. So this is something that our College of Education colleagues have put together. If you see Jessica Pandya or Dr. Kitty Fortner, go shake her hand, because this has been a mission for 5 years to get this thing stood up. A third area is advising and support services. And I really have to thank Myra Soriano and Andy Drummond. This is where we're trying to integrate everything we do with the affinity centers, with our college student success centers. The idea here is to provide integrated services for students. If we're truly going to be a student-ready campus, we need to have appreciative advising. We need to have models that bring together everything in a one-stop shop. After we're finished with this address today, if you haven't visited it, go down to the College Student Success Center that's just down the hall here. You'll see evidence of what we're trying to do, and it's making a difference. The fourth area is professional development, and what we're trying to do here is really promoting an agenda of equity for creative activities and also what we do in research. In many cases, the research agenda on this campus has really been skewed in certain areas, and we want to expand it across everything that we're doing among the faculty, among the staff. This is going to be key. I would also say here that the other element is the professional development that we do. And this professional development, I heard this the other day, and you probably have heard it before, this is professional development for everybody at all levels. So the line that I use often is, how are you going to get people that are university builders? You can't pour from an empty cup. So this is going to be investing in people on this campus to make this truly a world-class university. We now move into a place of making sure people aren't pouring from an empty cup. So those are several examples of things that we're really focused on. Wanted to use that as a point of conversation. Again, enlisting all and every of you to come together with us in academic affairs and across divisions. I am proud of our interdivisional collaboration. We wouldn't have gotten here without any of that, and we need to continue in that vein. And with that, I'll turn it over to Vice President Deb Wallace as the next person to present an area update.
Okay, good morning. I think it's still morning. Good morning to everyone. I think Dr. Porter nailed it. You all look so beautiful from this vantage point, but I'm going to take just a few moments to share some observations and kind of where we're going and where we've been in the Division of Administration and Finance. And I also have to give kudos to my team, because we cannot do this work, or I can't do this work, without the support that I receive on a daily basis, 24/7 basis from my team. And that includes our AVP of Human Resources. I see Monica Ponce here. Thank you for all of your work. So one of the things that Dr. Porter shared that I like that is integral to the work that we're doing in administration and finance is that for the most part, we are support services on the campus. So everything that we do is in support of the work that Dr. Porter talked about earlier, and is integral to the work. We just recently received a report talking about how facilities on the campus, the importance of facilities and how students react in classrooms to color, if they're cold in the classrooms, all of those things are just quite important. So again, we're providing that support. But as far as an overview goes, again, this is not an exhaustive list of things that we're trying to do. Again, a lot of things that we're doing are in the background. We're playing in the background and providing those support services. And one I think that is critical to the campus being successful is intentionality with the work that we do, providing resources to the campus. One of the things that we knew when Dr. Porter came aboard is that building that infrastructure for DEIJ is having the resources, having the financial resources to do that. So we've been trying to do some of that intentional work to make sure that she has those resources. And it's not just about being every campus. If you talk to any of the other CFOs in the CSU, we're all resource constrained. Right? But it's about how we use those resources, how we really look at the colors of money that we have on the campus to be able to do the things that are necessary to do this work. So again, we're wholeheartedly supportive of this work. And again, it's going to take all of us to do that. So we want to talk about just a few key updates. Again, this is certainly not exhaustive, but just a few key things that we're working on and some things that we're working on in the background, talking about diversity recruitment and retainment of our employees and of our students, because a lot of our students are also student employees. And I'm happy to announce that, again, this is intentional work, that we have recently hired a new talent acquisition specialist, a task, to develop those strategies and foster diversity and ensure compliance in order to attract, hire, and retain diverse, qualified candidates. I think that is very important because what we're struggling with, even after the pandemic, is retaining employees, right? There's a lot of competition out there in all of not just higher education, but there's a lot of competition out there in other industries as well that are offering things. So we have to be creative in our offerings and how we retain employees. So I'm excited about this new hire that we have. The employee exit survey and interview, employees separating from the university. How can we get information from those employees? What can we do better? How can we improve? What are some of the areas that we need to focus on for our employees to ensure that new employees that are coming in, we position them for success? Our AVP of Human Resources, I just gave her a little shout out, Ms. Monica Ponce, is really working toward this effort and making sure I know that personally that she sits down with a lot of the employees during those exit interviews and asks them really poignant questions about what can we do better as a campus in order to serve our employees. Okay. Review and implement an affirmative action plan. That is one of the things that we are working on in concert with Dr. Porter's area, and we're engaging in those collaborative efforts to ensure that our affirmative action plan, that we have the data to support, and a shout out to our institutional research folks for providing that information that goes into that plan. And it's a way for us also, too, to see where we can have some areas of improvement with respect to affirmative action on the campus. Revised requests for proposal, or RFP process. One of the things that I'd like to share is that, you're living and learning through this space, and one of the current examples that we have right now is what we were experiencing with the campus with respect to the Aramark contract. While we had gone through and done the process right, the process dynamic wasn't an issue with Aramark, but what we decided was, and what we knew was that we could definitely improve that space to incorporate equity, diversity, and inclusion work. So we collaborated with Dr. Barbie Porter. We worked with our Director of Procurement and Contracts, Ms. Maria Hernandez, who is an experienced contracts practitioner on the campus. And we have already done this work. We were able to revise our RFP process, and that is already in the works. All of our brand new contracts, I see AVP Eric McCurdy is up here. He just recently engaged in a very significant contract for the campus, and we made sure that this work was included in there. But we're going to be asking vendors, not only from a sponsorship perspective, but we're widening our approach to the way we do business with vendors, and we're also asking those components that are included in our new process for DEIJ and making sure that we have a sustainable practice for that. So that work is already ongoing. Just a couple of the other things that we're working on campus, not only in our procurement area, but we're working on making sure that we recognize our employees. We're also, too, as we go through our budget with our university budget committee, that we are very intentional about including work that includes diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're going to be sharing a lot of that information with the campus as far as transparency is concerned. You'll be able to visit our budget webpage, and you'll be able to see some of the resources that we're putting directly toward this work. So with that, I know our time is of the essence, but I'm going to move forward, and Dr. William Franklin is coming up.
Thank you, Deb. This is an exciting time for me. Traditionally, across higher education, much of this work is centered in student affairs. And that's a problem, because it can't just be in student affairs. And it was for quite some time at Dominguez Hills. When I became the vice president of student affairs, we had, remember the multicultural affairs area? Yeah, that was centered in student affairs. And the work, most of our culture and identity centers, can we give our culture and identity centers a round of applause? Heavy lifting going on in those spaces. Most of them are less than 5 years old. So that should tell you something about the state of diversity. And so before I get started, I want to sort of give a shout out, because we didn't get here overnight. And I see some faces in the room. At about 2016 and 17, our then president, Dr. Willie Hagan, asked if I would chair the President's Council on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Well, you know, when your president says, will you, you can't say no. Got a wife and kid at home, so yeah, I'll do it. Let's make this happen. And it is, and I'm proud of that council. I'm proud of the work that council did, and I dare say that today's State of Diversity address would not have happened if they were not assigned to look at the state of diversity at Cal State Dominguez Hills. And two things, and I need to shout out their names really quickly. I'll take some of my address because I need to give them honor. Stephanie Brazeley, who I know is here. Annie Choi. Bianca Murillo. Ken O'Donnell was the interim vice president at that time. Enrique Ortega, Kalia Bradshaw, who's no longer here. And I got to shout out our students. Obioha, you stand on the shoulders of some great students. Justin Blakely was our ASI president around that time. Baconin Nixon, Magali Ordonez, Markel Reed, Jamie Purnell, Deborah Roberson Sims. You all remember Deborah Roberson Sims? Monica's still standing on those shoulders. Elizabeth Schrock, Aaron Street, Lisa Sueke, and Marcelo Vasquez were the ones, and we were together for about a year and a half doing the same data, looking at the same information that Dr. Porter sent. And we went with the president with two recommendations. Number one, you need a Dr. Bobby Porter. That was number one. And the second one, and you saw that in 2018, we need you to commission the campus's first serious climate study. And I got a shout out to the campus community at that time. We literally had over 57% of faculty who responded, literally over 48% of students who responded, staff who responded, and administrators. It was phenomenal. And then we had a presidential transition, 2 failed searches, for DEI. And oh yeah, just a global pandemic. And after all of those pieces, fortunately, Dr. Bobby Porter came to us, and today is about understanding that student affairs is always going to be about making sure that we're advancing belonging and inclusion, especially with students, but we cannot do that without the foundation that this division will set. If we try to continue doing it, it is amazing because, is Dr. Smith in the room? Yeah, hey, Matt. So in 2021, Dr. Smith said, basically, student affairs reeks. And when your AVP comes in and tells you that, it's sort of like, well, what do you do with that? You're fired. I didn't say that. But what I did say, we ended up bringing on a group of professionals across the nation who understood student affairs greatly. And they came in and they literally looked under the hood and they told us some things about ourselves. We were looking at how we communicate, how we train and develop faculty, how we collaborate and how we partner. And they looked at our DEI framework. And I'm going to tell you basically what they told us. It's tough when you invite company to your home and they come in and tell you exactly what you need to do and you just want to kick them out. But we didn't do that. They said, the work to support diversity, equity, and inclusion is occurring throughout the division, barely. However, the division is challenged by a lack of strategy and defined leadership at the university and division level. This is pre-Dr. Porter. So I'm saying that no division in this room can do this work without the foundation that that division will provide. If we try, we're going to continue tinkering around the edges, acting like we're playing in the NFL when really it's just Pop Warner around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. If we're serious, we will invest in what Dr. Porter is trying to do, and we will build this division really quickly. They went on to say, being diverse and not moving forward because you're making surface level observations around the critical things that need to happen in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so there are a couple things that we're trying to do and that we're not going to be able to do until and unless we stand on the shoulders of what I really would like to call a backbone organization. This is going to take collective action, and in order to have a collective impact, student affairs can no longer tinker around the edges. Our culture and identity centers literally must benefit from that last one, which I think on that side, staff and professional development. People are tired of shouldering this without having the resources and time, talent, and attention to do this work. But campus climate is something that Dr. Porter talked about. Effective communication. We're literally learning in student affairs how to talk to each other better, how to communicate better, how to connect in more strategic ways. And lastly, and this is something that I know that we're going to be able to do, we have to celebrate and acknowledge success, not just around the DEI lens, although that is important, but it is important to understand if you don't have an infrastructure in your division for acknowledging success and advancing the work, it is really difficult to specifically for DEIJ work. So I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about the present, but more importantly, I'm excited that this room is crowded and that this campus has for a long time cared about this work. But caring is sharing, and we're going to have to share to ensure that that division helps us be who we say we are versus what we need to do to get there. Thank you. I'm now turning this over to Vice President Eva.
Thank you, Dr. Franklin. Good morning. It is still morning, and hopefully it'll be a morning by the time I'm finished. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eva Shevchikova. I have the honor of serving as the interim vice president of University Advancement. And a quick shout out to my team, who I know is in the room. This is a division that handles all sorts of areas. Functional areas include fundraising, government affairs, community relations, alumni relations, and ceremonies and events. And I too am really glad to be at this coming out party, and I love what Dr. P said earlier about an arrow pointing in a new direction. This topic is personally very important to me. When I first came to this campus, I was really thrilled to learn that DEIJ is part of our values, is who we are, and the story of our campus is what attracted me to come here in the first place. This role and being here is a dream come true for me as a first-generation college student, an immigrant, later a naturalized U.S. citizen, and I love that I'm surrounded by passionate people who not only want to talk about the work we've got to do, but also want to do the work that we've got to do. And I'm going to touch on 4 areas, and I'm going to start with something that Obi said earlier, because his touching on the story of who we are, and I love the fact that you looked at ChatGPT. That has not occurred to me, to see what ChatGPT is saying about who we are. The idea of a story of who we are today and our origin story. My team and I share our story all the time, from California all the way to Washington, D.C. And we all know that telling a story is a way to build connections. A compelling story is a differentiator. It's something that sets us apart. And I'm hoping that as a campus, we can better refine the story of who we are. Just like the president mentioned, moving beyond the definition of demographics and beyond just reciting the statistics. Our story needs to be simple, digestible. It's got to be personal, authentic, and honest, but it's also a very complex story. So how do we do that successfully? The second area I want to touch on that is relevant to university advancement and this campus is we spent quite a bit of time, Dr. Porter and Dr. Franklin and I, earlier this year, talking about how we raise money for this campus. And our model and the way our team is structured is somewhat traditional. It's built around 5 of our academic colleges, all for a very good reason. But we asked ourselves the question, what would happen and what could we do as a campus, as a team, if we refined and expanded our team? And found somebody, found a role that would raise money specifically for a lot of our student success initiatives and diversity programs on campus. And I hope I will have some good news to share with you on this front very soon. But this is our future. This is where a lot of opportunities are, and this is truly where we excel as a campus. The third area I want to touch on is access and equity with existing resources. We talk a lot about being resource constrained when it comes to finances, but we also know that we do have resources already on campus that includes philanthropic dollars and other types of financial support. So I'm very proud and very honored to be co-leading the strategic plan pillar for equitable access together with Dr. Deborah Brandon. And we have a fantastic working group together. And part of what we're looking at is how do we efficiently and effectively distribute dollars into the hands of students. It takes too long from the time a student is awarded a scholarship to the moment when that money actually gets into their pockets. We know we can do better, and this is about the policies and practices that we had talked about earlier. And the last thing that I'll mention is the amazing institutional expertise that we have in this room and on this campus. When my team and I and many of you go into spaces where we talk with business leaders, we talk with corporate leaders, what we're hearing over and over again is how much they're struggling with DEIJ, how much they're trying to still figure it out. Many of them are hiring their very first chief diversity officers. They're trying to stand up their own programs, diversify their leadership boards, their leadership teams, and create a more inclusive environment for their employees. And we've heard from several corporate partners already telling us that they're looking at us and looking to us for leadership and ideas and expertise. So what we've started exploring is how can we partner with them and share this expertise that we have on campus, share the space with them, Some of the early ideas include things like convening a diversity summit, maybe thinking about developing a new certificate so that these leaders can be trained. This is a way that we can bring value to them, build closer relationships and deeper engagement, which will ultimately lead to long-lasting partnerships. So with that, I invite all of you to connect with me at the reception afterwards. And we have one more speaker, and he's getting up right now, and that is Vice President of IT, Chris Manriquez.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? All right. We're going to hope the slides work. I only have 45 of them, so everybody hang on. We are getting there. All right. Okay. Going the wrong way. Here we go. There we go. So my team is focused literally on one item, laser focused, the digital divide. It is the equity issue of our time, and until we address it, because what's undergirding it are all the other elements that you heard Bobby talk about earlier, expressed, and how we've laid out some of our digital society. It's in how data runs work. It's how you can get to spectrum or you can't. I'm sorry to mention a vendor. How you can get to broadband or you can't. It's measured in all of those things. And the way we're going to get it done, and this is, I'm trying to do this really fast, the way we're going to get it done is Dominguez Hills is the trusted partner. We already are. IT in this campus has people coming from all over the state, up and down, asking us questions on how do you do X. And I get that we're not perfect, and I get that we're going to grow and we're going to change. But those questions that are coming in is because we're already seen in the lead position. Toward the president's points that he was making earlier, it's the thought and the way we approach things, it's crucial and key. So I'm going to bring up the slide that talks about some of these. So the first one is addressing digital as a basic need. It's a reality. If any of us are going to get to our tomorrows that we dream and want to express, we're going to need that gap divided. Our kids, ourselves, anybody that's coming up, component, building the infrastructure, heard loud and clear from the strategic plan group is the campus lacks infrastructure. You can throw bodies at problems all you want, but until you have the infrastructure to address those problems and get at the different questions that get us the different answers we want, until we can get to that place, we're talking about the same thing over and over again. Comprehensive data ecosystem for this campus that looks at it the way that Dominguez Hills does it. Not the way it's prepackaged, not even the way our system may ask questions. It's the way we're looking at it that changes how the system does that. Third component, advancing data literacy, right? We've all heard this, financial literacy, data literacy. Once you get on, once we give you the connectivity and you're up in the cloud, looking at Twitter for 24 hours is not data literacy. It's not. We're growing a generation of kids that thinks it is. And until we start twisting that mind frame and that set to say, how do we address that at true literacy around data, around information use? How do we get that in an equitable way across our society? The outside Dominguez Hills, built from the inside, those are the key components we've got to do, and the infrastructure that underlays that, okay? And think about this for a minute. We're all accustomed to looking at typical measures of diversity, compositional ones. How are we going to get at the new ones when we start measuring things at neurodiversity, right? Emergent after COVID like an explosion. And the ways those are expressed in workforce and in the ways we do things educationally at the institution. For us to begin unpacking that as leaders for where we are, not followers, because that's what we do here. Last component, socially just methodologies, right? So we all hear ESG. That's fine. But until we ourselves define that framework to say, what does Dominguez Hills mean when it says social justice? I get that any other company can define it for themselves, and that's wonderful for them. But what do we mean it here? What does socially just actually mean? All right, with that, those are the four components that we're looking at, building the undergirding infrastructure that allows that to flow through software applications, platforms, and the way we function as an institution in that space. So that's where we're focused here. So thank you for those, and I'm going to hand it back to Bobby.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
All right, another round of applause for our various vice presidents. So if you've ever been in a meeting with me, you may have heard me obsess about keeping us on time. So we are at the time and end of our program. And what is traditional and true to me, I just can't push us much further past our time here. So I'm actually going to bring us to a close, but the reason I'm bringing us to a close and moving us is because we have an event immediately following this. You've heard us mention a few times that we have this new division for diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice, excuse me. In this division, we officially launch in the new fiscal year. Immediately following this program, and in the room right next to us, we have a reception set up where we will be providing a divisional preview, if you will, so you can anticipate and understand where the division is going in the coming years, our initial strategic plan, some of the efforts we have in place. And it provides a forum for us to start to respond to some of the questions that have come in. So I want to be clear, we're not ignoring the questions. I warned you we may not be able to get to all of them. As I said, we will send a follow-up message that responds to the questions we received via the Qualtrics form. But if you're able to stay, we have a reception with food. We're going to feed y'all because we've had you in the space for 90 minutes, so you're probably tired. We have refreshments, we have food, and a short program here, and we'll start to respond to those questions. So thank you again for your time. Thank you again for your commitment to this work on our campus. Thank you for all that you do. I'm most grateful to everyone that was here today. You see the acknowledgments on this screen. It is not the work of an individual, it is the work of the collective, and I look forward to being your true partner in equity as we engage in this work. Thank you so much. You may